Hail thee well, and welcome all. I'm the Jake of all trades, and this is episode 4, part 2 of my Avatar Campaign Journal series. Last episode, the party arrived in the large Earth Kingdom metropolis of Dao Sun, and they quickly made it to the Yang family estate, Phang's family estate, where they were hastily prepared for a very large banquet, hosting several dozen Earth Kingdom socialites and social elite characters within the area. It was at this party that they met Phang's father, Liu, and they met Pema's father, Hosen, who said that he needed to speak to them about something very urgent, but he couldn't do it here. It would have to wait until tomorrow. I also had my players roll percentile dice to determine who would become the Avatar, or who would be born the Avatar, because you don't become the Avatar, obviously. And I'm going to tell you how I did that this episode. One thing I forgot to mention last episode was that Sindal's player was actually absent for part 1 of Dao Sun, and so he wasn't there when his character was arrested and thrown into jail. So I had him roll his percentile die afterwards and give that to me via text. Another thing that I forgot to mention was that Governor Kami was supposed to be at that very large banquet that the players first encountered. It was out on her estate, actually. She was hosting it, and she was supposed to be at the party, but then there was like some unforeseen circumstances or something that prevented her from showing up to the party. So she was supposed to be there, but then she wasn't. So, before we got started that week, I had all my players sitting down the table around me, and I made sure that they were all focused on me during those very first opening moments, and particularly the 2 percentile die that I was holding in my hand. I don't have them now. I probably should. But I wanted to make sure that they were all paying attention to me, because they knew what was going on, I bet, because they had rolled those percentages at the end of last week's session, and so they were expecting it, because I had let them know, like, hey, these percentages are in some way going to determine which of you is the Avatar. Because at the moment, no one knows who the Avatar is, and it's someone within the party, though, I decided, and due to events that are going to be explained this episode, it's going to be revealed to the players why the Avatar cycle is potentially out of whack, why it could be any of them, essentially. And I'm going to show you their percentages that they rolled last week, and now I'm going to show you a picture of how I reordered them. And essentially what I did was I just stretched Phang's 95 up to 100, and then I said that if I rolled my percentile die, wherever they landed essentially, at one of those numbers or below determined who was going to be the Avatar. So as you can see, Sindal had a pretty low chance, and I had actually spoken to all of my players before this had happened too, and I had tried to gather as much information on them as I could. Vis-a-vis, do they want to be the Avatar, mainly? Do you want to, I shouldn't have said vis-a-vis there, that was stupid. So, do you want to be the Avatar? That was essentially it, and I know that Sindal really didn't want to be the Avatar, and so when he rolled 8%, I was like, hey, that's great, that'll work along nicely, and then it worked along well with everyone else, I thought, to give everyone a sort of a decent chance considering how much they wanted it. I feel like Tiki wanted it more than anyone else in the party. She was the most into it. As I think I've mentioned before, she was my most interested player, so she was really into that. But I rolled my percentile die, and I got a 76, meaning Phang was our Avatar. And this was revealed at the very start of session, and I did this because I knew that I had really good players who were going to be able to not metagame with that knowledge. They were going to be able to just sit on that as players and then not let their characters have anything to do with that information, really. They were just going to have to wait and see how I decided to reveal Phang's Avatar spirit. And then they were ready to start. They had a whole day planned in the city from Liu Yang. He was so excited to hang out with his son that he had planned a whole bunch of stuff, taking the whole day off pretty much, almost the whole day off, so that he could spend as much time with them as he could. And he paid for everything pretty much too, because he wanted to show him a good time. And he's of a very high status in this city, so he probably wouldn't even have had to pay in a lot of these situations. More like call-in favors. So he had this whole itinerary planned, but before we get to that, no one remembered that Sindal had been arrested from last episode. I mentioned that he was arrested right at the start of session, and he just kind of disappeared, and everyone kind of forgot about him until I mentioned that, like, Liu Yang says something about, like, oh, hey, I heard that wasn't there a fourth one of you? What happened to him? And then they were like, oh, yeah, he's in jail, I think. And Liu Yang is, of course, like, well, this won't do. We need to get him out of there yesterday, essentially. So let's get our lawyer, and we'll get him down there, and we'll get all these charges cleared, and I'll pay for the bail. Don't you worry about it. And after that, I can meet him, and you guys can all hang out, and it'll be the way it should be. As I mentioned last episode, I had an escape route planned for this player to get out of jail pretty quickly. And now this was the escape plan, was the family lawyer, essentially. The Yang family lawyer going down and getting a lot of the charges cleared and getting him out on bail for the rest of them. What I forgot to mention was that of the people I was playing with at the table, this character, Sindal, his player was the one that I had known the longest. I've known him since we were both kids, actually. And so he was actually the only person who I was at the table with that I would have really gone that far with, probably. Even with my girlfriend, I probably wouldn't have done that because she's a very novice role player, and I don't know how well she would do in that situation, and there's no reason to put her in that situation, really. But with Sindal, it was a little different, and I felt like that we had that sort of trust that I could do this, and it wouldn't be a problem. So Sindal gets out of jail the next morning when his player arrives at the table, pretty much, and the player doesn't really suffer any consequences. But like I said, I probably shouldn't have done it in the first place, so no harm, no foul, I suppose. But he did not join up with the other players like I thought he would. In fact, he wanted to continue his loner persona, and he wanted to go off and do something for himself. And so while the rest of the party was happy to follow along Liu with his long itinerary of stops and food and visits and stuff, Sindal decided that he wanted to go do some other stuff instead. And so he explored a different part of the city. Actually, the other city, Dao Sun, which will be over here on the map if I remember to put it in. But yeah, he was doing that while the rest of the party was doing their thing. And I'll tell you what he was up to in just a few minutes. So like I said, I wrote out this whole list of events for the rest of the party, and I made sure to make it clear that they could do whatever they wanted to do. This was just like a suggestion, like, hey, you don't really know what's here because you don't really live in the area, and Phang's already seen all this crap anyway, so he probably doesn't even care about half of it. So this is just like a quick list of like nice little tourist stops if you want to get a feel for the city. And all the players were like pretty cool with that. They were like, yeah, that sounds great to me. Yeah, sure. And so we were off to it. The first on the stop was the Long Shadow for breakfast. And then they went to the zoo, and then there was the Jade Rose for lunch, where they spoke with Hosen. Then, after lunch, they went to a pro bending match. They had dinner at the Long Shadow again, and then afterwards they went to a beautiful play at the Weeping Dragon. And I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of how all that stuff went down. I based a lot of the businesses and stuff around the city, around Ba Sing Se, really, is where I took a lot of inspiration from, like, the inner ring, like, from the noble upper elite area. So, kind of use that as, like, in your mental imagery while I am describing to you all of this stuff. So, first, the Long Shadow for breakfast. It sits right on the water on the southeast edge of town, right on the river there, and it's got a huge deck over the river, and it's only open for breakfast and dinner. And it's called the Long Shadow because in the morning when the sun comes up over the mountains, it just kind of peeks through like two really big ones, and it just like creates these huge stretched out shadows that stretch across the city and then slowly recede as the sun goes up. And then as it goes down again, the shadows grow long again because it's at the other end of the sky. And so that's why it's called the Long Shadow, and that's why it's only open breakfast and dinner. It's a super fancy restaurant, and to reflect that, the menus didn't have any prices on them. Kind of like if you have to ask, then you can't afford it sort of idea behind it. But like I said, not a problem because Liu pays for everything. He just tells them to go ahead and order whatever they wanted. I feel like the special was like this local egg scramble or something like that with some other vegetables and meat and stuff like that in there. So yeah, then after that they went off to the zoo. The zoo is also on the southeast edge of town, and it is incredibly busy. It appears that there are lots and lots of people wandering through this large zoo structure. They have these huge earth-bended corrals for all of the animals, the roaming herds and stuff like that, and they also have like all kinds of specialized exhibits for more exotic animals as well. And I've got a quick list of here of just some of the random sites of interest. They had the armadillo lions, which just reopened because they just came out of hibernation again. I thought that would be fun for the players. There's saber-toothed moose lions, I had 2 parents and a calf, and they probably might have been coming out of hibernation as well. I don't know. We have flying lemurs and cat owls and parrot lizards. I decided that I wanted there to be a large aviary structure, and I just gave each of them sort of their own separate enclosures so that they wouldn't be harassing one another. Maybe there's some parakeets in there as well, who knows. There was also a platypus bear, just one of them, but, kind of fun to have that, a little platypus bear, just like meandering around, eating cabbages and stuff. We had a whole town of singing gophers. This was one of the highlights. I knew my players would latch onto that, at least one of them. And one of them did. Tiki was super into it. It was just a large stone enclosure. It was like earthen, ground and stuff, and there was a whole town, so they had like burrowed all through it. But then it was just, I imagined it as like a large stone ring with like a stone floor that was just like 20 feet below ground level, so that they had plenty of room to dig around, but then they couldn't get through the stone. They had to stay there. So there was a whole town of them, and the people could come down, and then they had a bunch of like pipes and stuff just like sitting on the ground and on tables and stuff that you could pick up and play if you wanted to play a song with the gophers. And so my players were kind of interested in that. I should have brought like a recorder or something for them to play, and then just parroted them. That would be something to do if I ever did this game again. After that, there was a hog monkey troop. They had their own very large cage, and I just thought, again, from the Ba Sing Se Zoo, I tried to, pick a couple animals that I thought were interesting. And the hog monkeys I thought were pretty cool. So I included a troop of hog monkeys. And then there was also, this was the last one, I believe, there was a single air bison, and it was a juvenile, it was a young one. And they had appeared that it lost its herd. They were like flying or migrating back to their pastures from the winter, and it was like maybe a storm or something knocked it out of the sky. They don't really know. They just found it injured in the woods nearby or something, and then they got it, and they're letting it recover here, and they say that they're going to release it, at the Northern Air Temple once it's been fully healed. And I threw this one in there for Pema because I thought she would be interested in a wounded air bison. I thought she would just be like, oh, it's cute. But Tiki also, I think, was really into the air bison. After that, I think we'll talk about Sindal now and what he did in Dao Sun's sister city. Before that, though, I need to give you a little bit of history on Dao Jun and Dao Sun. They are actually cities recurring from Avatar Oshi's campaign, from the first campaign that took place 20 some odd years ago. And back then, when Avatar Oshi rolled through, the 2 cities were still called sister cities, but there wasn't even a bridge in between them. And Dao Sun was super wealthy, and Dao Jun was like the village was like impoverished, and their crops wouldn't grow for some reason. And later on in that mission, Avatar Oshi figured out that this character called Hama, this incredibly powerful earthbender, was purposefully draining the water from their aquifers, their local reservoirs of water, and pumping it over essentially across the river to Dao Sun for them to use essentially. And that was a big deal. And Avatar Oshi had to stop her and finish her off. And after they had expelled Hama from the city, she decided that there should be a large bridge that was built between the 2 cities, so that if you're called sister, even though if they're sister cities, they should act like it, and they should be sharing the wealth and becoming one with each other. And that bridge was under construction when Avatar Oshi left 20 years ago, and now when the players come back through, it's been built again. So, but it appears that there's not quite the equality that Avatar Oshi envisioned between the 2 cities. So Sindal makes his way across this very large, very nicely constructed bridge to the sister city of Dao Jun. And he sees that there's lots of guards posted along the way, and that there appears to be a huge flood of people coming across the bridge. Mostly air benders, air nomads, water tribe, and Fire Nation citizens who are just living in the Earth Kingdom here. Like I talked about, there's a large dispersal of different nation people throughout all of the nations. So there's kind of a mix and match of people. And so, but it appears that most of these people are heading over here, and it looks like they all have some sort of papers in hand and stuff, so that when the guards stop them, they present these papers, the guards look over them, and then they send them on their way across the bridge. Sindal figures out that these people look like they're going to work. These are a lot of the vendors and artisans and stuff that work at those high-classy shops that I mentioned last episode. So he notices that, and he doesn't have any problem making his way into the city of Dao Jun. They don't really care if you go into the poor, slummy area, because that's what Dao Jun is. It's kind of like a slum. They just care when you're coming from the slums into the nice part of the city, the Dao Sun. That's when they start to look at your papers and stuff. So, he makes his way across, and he notices immediately that it's not nearly as wealthy. There's a huge population of air nomads and water tribe and Fire Nation citizens. Not nearly as many Earth. There are some Earthbenders there, it does appear, but those Earthbenders are also, it looks like most of them are living in poverty as well. And he also notices that there's a huge ornate statue of Governor Kami, which is strikingly out of place with all of the poverty around him. You know, all of the dirty streets and, you know, beggars and stuff. This large gleaming statue kind of stands apart from the rest of the city. There's very few vendors selling their wares on the streets and stuff like that, and there's just a lot of impoverished people and beggars roaming around. So Sindal decides that he just wants to spend the day fishing, and he wants to try to help out these locals with some of his fish that he catches. And I was like, you know what, that's cool. That's totally cool, Sindal. You can absolutely do that. He had been making a point to try to fish every time they stopped for camp, or every time they were near water. He was like, you know what, we're not doing anything right now. I'm gonna go cast my line into the water, see if I can rustle up some grub. And so it made perfect sense that he was continuing with this. He wanted to keep fishing, and that was cool. And he wanted to help these people out. So when he caught like a couple baskets full of fish, instead of trying to like sell them, he tried to like just pass them out to all the people. And he rolled like insanely well too, like just ridiculously. He might have been a natural 20. And I was like, well, I mean, you can't feed like everybody. It's a whole city. You'd have to like drain the river. That's just like impossible. But I mean, you get like several bushels, like big baskets full of fish, essentially. So he had a bunch of fish, and I think he was going to try to set up shop. Actually, he's going to try to bring him across the bridge and set up shop. And the guards were giving him a hard time because he didn't have a license for it, and he was a firebender. They noticed right away he was Fire Nation. They didn't like that, and then they were like, no, you can't be hawking that stuff here. You need a permit, you need a license, you need specific zoning, you know, permits, and you know, there's a lot of work that needs to go into this, you know. And so he was like, you know what, I guess I can't sell all this fish. I'm just gonna hand it out to all of these poor people. I think that's what happened. So that's what Sindal did, while the rest of the party was enjoying their day in the super wealthy Dao Sun, completely unaware of this the huge the asymmetry in wealth that existed between the two cities. So while Sindal is becoming acquainted with the citizens of Dao Jun, the rest of the party is in Dao Sun, and they're going to the Jade Rose now. It turns out that Liu has another small engagement that he needs to take care of, and so he says that he'll leave them for lunch, and that he'll come and meet them up again. He'll meet them at the pro bending match afterwards. You know, he's got some reserved seats that they can all sit at. So he leaves them there, and they go into the Jade Rose, and they find a nice seat with Hosen, because he's sitting there, and they start to talk a little bit. It's a small, unmarked building. It's very quiet, and it's very, very fancy. On the inside, it's very fancy, like nice colored, like deep jade-colored paints and stuff like that, and some golds and stuff. And it's just very nice. And you know, the teacups are all in, and the pots are very, very expensive ceramic, very nice, ornate stuff. And there's also an Iroh-like shopkeep, whose name is Mako, named after the Iroh's original voice actor, Mako. And I threw him in there just because I based it off of Iroh's tea shop from his, like, when he was in Ba Sing Se. That's kind of what I was channeling when I created this tea shop. And so it only made sense that the shopkeep was just Iroh, essentially. But I didn't want it to be that dead of a giveaway to be like, oh yeah, his name is Iroh. That's just too easy. I like to make it a little more difficult. So anyway, they meet up with Hosen. He's waiting there, and he seems really distraught and out of order. And after ordering off the menu, he's maybe feeling a little more in order. I don't know. Pardon the joke there. You can see over here that this is one of the props I prepared for the city, was a Jade Rose menu. And you can see a few of the different items that we have listed on there for them to choose from. And I think there was some question about this or that, like, what's this? Toasted green thing, you know, like, oh, that's just a different type of tea. It's like a toasted rice green tea blend. I'm like, oh, okay, that's all right. But anyway, so they talk with Hosen, and he immediately tells them, you know, after they've had a chance to, you know, sip and eat a little bit, you know, he begins to talk to them about, you know, why he wanted to talk with them. He tells them that the spirit world is out of balance. It's out of whack. It's unbalanced. For some reason, something's happening. He says that there are uncharted waters, and he doesn't know how this spiritual disruption could manifest. He says it's possible that the avatar cycle itself might become unbalanced in this spiritual chaos that's going on right now. He says there's just crazy stuff happening in the spirit world. And then he also tells them that as soon as they get finished up with their business with the Earth Queen, you know, this Avatar business in Hunro, he's like, I need you guys to, like, meet me at the Western Air Temple. If you find the Avatar, bring them with you if you can, because the Avatar we're going to need their help as well. And he also says that I don't know how yet, but I can feel that each of you has a pivotal role to play in future events, you know, looking across the table at all of them. And I wanted to be pretty heavy, and I wanted them to get the implication that this was like, Destiny talking. This wasn't the Game Master trying to keep the game on the rails. This was Destiny speaking to them. You know what I mean? So that's what they did in the Jade Rose. If you were listening carefully there, you also picked up that's where I planted that business with opening up the Avatar to anyone in the party. You know, the spiritual world is out in disorder. The Avatar cycle is potentially unbalanced. That was my way of saying, like, hey, the Avatar might not be born into the Earth Kingdom next. Who knows where they could be born? They could be born into the Fire Nation. They could be born back into the Water Tribes. They could show up at the Air Temple. Who knows? It could be, I don't know, uncharted waters. This is like, it's just, shit is going like all crazy in his mind. Like, he's got like alarms flaring all over the place, because Hosen is a very spiritually inclined dude, and so he's in tune with all that stuff. He kind of feels all of this stuff happening, and he doesn't know how to stop it or what to do. And he's like, man, I know that these kids are going to be able to help me out, though. I feel like these kids are like the new Team Avatar, essentially. So after lunch, Hosen says that he, now that he's spoken with them, he needs to get back to the Western Air Temple because of all of the crazy stuff that's going on there, all of the tension between the Fire Nation and the Air Nomads, and so he needs to go back and try to deal with that as soon as he can. And that's when the players, they finish up their lunch and they meet back up with Liu, and they go to relieve some of that tension that I just built by going to a pro bending match. And this is where I managed to finish a second prop for this session. I finished a pro bending poster here for the Sunderdome. The Sunderdome! Yes, this is my version of the Legend of Korra, essentially bending stuff. I was heavily inspired by Legend of Korra bending circuits, like the professional bending, to do this. And so, in my own little spin on it, because, I wanted it to still be in tune with, like, Avatar, and I wanted it to be, like, to stay true to, like, canon and stuff. So, none of, like, the cool metal rings and, buzzing sounds and lights and flashing lights and everything and megaphones and crap. So, none of that stuff. It's just a traditional, like, Roman Colosseum-style place. Room for approximately 1,500 people in the stands, and this is a large arena near the city center. And I've got teams of 2 for today's matches, essentially, that are fighting against each other. And there are no like elements on the same team. So you have to have like a fire, water, and air and earth. No water, water, no earth, earth. No doubling up on elements. So and another thing is that all of the teams who are competing are local entries also. So they all come from around this area. Again, further emphasizing this mix of culture that has taken place in this era of the four kingdoms or 4 nations. So, the rules are pretty similar to Legend of Korra bending. The further you get pushed back, the less points you manage to accrue. And if you have less points than the other team, then you lose the round to them. It's essentially a large stone pit that's like below the audience. The audience is set up like I said, like a coliseum essentially. And it's a stone floor, like a worked stone floor, very rough stone floor, and there are ditches of water, like channels of water that are just running throughout the whole place. And with that, everybody should have an element that they can use to throw around at the people. It's just basic earth blasts allowed, pretty much. And there were 4 matches that I scheduled, and I said that there was going to be more next week. And I rolled for each match to compose the teams and for the outcome of the teams. I just rolled randomly on dice to figure out what the teams were going to be and then what the outcomes were going to be. And I named each of the teams, too. It was kind of fun. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to read those results for you here. So first we have the Waterbender and Firebender, team name Moonfire, versus the Airbender and Earthbender, team name Yang and Yin. I'm pretty sure that those were just the people's names. I thought that was fun. Instead of yin yang, it's yin and yin. It was a pretty close match, but yin and yang came out on top. So the second match was a fire and a waterbender called Smoke on the Water versus a waterbender and earthbender called Terra Firma. And it was a pretty good match, but Terra Firma came out on top. After that, it was an airbender and a waterbender called the Storm Clouds versus an earthbender and a waterbender called the Mudslide. And it was a very one-sided match. You could say that Mudslide won in a mudslide. So after that, round 4 was Water versus an Earthbender. Sorry, their team name was Quicksand, and they were versing an Earthbender and a Firebender called the Firequakes. I don't know. I thought that just sounded like fun. Like instead of an earthquake, it's a firequake. So it was a pretty good start. Like the first round or two was pretty close, but then the second or third rounds, Quicksand came out on top. So yeah, those were the matches, and the players were super stoked when they saw it happening, and they were like, immediately, they were like, man, where do we sign up? When do we get to do this? And I was like, I don't know. They said they're having more matches next week, and I'm pretty sure at least 1 or 2 of my players wanted to like stick around until next week so that they could try their hand at this professional bending stuff. After the bending matches, I brought them over to the Long Shadow again for dinner, and they brought them out on the same large decks. They had different menus this time, though, dinner menus, much more expensive and fancy meals. And another thing that I noted was that they were serving fizzle wine with dinner as well, and everyone's like, fizzle wine? What the hell? What's that? And I was like, well, I figured I should have some sort of an alcoholic beverage in my game. Yeah, the Four Nations. I figured they probably would, like in real life, how people are about their booze, and so I figured they would want to have some sort of an alcohol, and so they would probably have wine of some kind. Well, this is an airbender wine, so an airbender specialty actually. They are able to use their airbending to essentially like carbonation. Is what I decided, and so they like carbonate this wine, and then they bottle it and ship it out across the Four Nations. And so some of that fizzle wine is here, and it is being served with dinner, and it's pretty fancy. And it's a pretty beautiful set, and I make it pretty serene and nice as the sun sets across the river. They all enjoy their meal and have a fun time, reminiscing about the fun day they've had. And then after dinner, it's time to go to the play. And they go over to the Weeping Dragon Playhouse. It's a large painted building. It's got a huge foyer with a waiting area, concession, atrium thingy, how those are in like theaters and stuff. And then large doors leading into like the front row area seating, or like the standing room, for like the commoner people. But then there's also 2 large sets of staircases on either side of this large atrium that lead up to the balcony seats. And that's where the players are headed because, like I said earlier, Lou has reserved some seats for them. So they're all going to go hang out at this... Oh, wait, no, that was for the bending thing. No, they had reserved seats at both. They had reserved seats at the bending match and at the Weeping Dragon. The play, though, I liked the play that I came up with. I wanted it to be kind of fun. I wanted it to be something true to the world, and so I took one of their actual stories, and I just decided that this was a play about that story. And I took the story of Oma and Shu, or Shu and Oma, whichever way you want to say it. And those of you who have seen Avatar all the way through a few times like me immediately will probably recognize those names. But if you haven't, I will tell you that the first act is very lighthearted and sentimental, and it's all about the power of love and stuff like that. But then the second act, it gets really dark and really sad, and yeah, it's very sad. And I actually teared up a little bit while I was narrating it to my players. Like, well, it's a play about this, and then this and this happens, and... Well, you kind of know how it ends as well. I won't get into that. If you don't know how it ends, be sure you watch Season 2, Episode 2 of the original Avatar series, The Cave of Two Lovers. And after the play had finished, people were crying, there was a standing ovation, and then that was it. That was it for the session, pretty much. Wait, that's not right. We haven't revealed the Avatar yet. Who's the Avatar, right? Well, you all know. We all know it's Phang. My players all knew it was Phang, too. And by this point, I'm sure they were probably getting a little itchy in the pants, a little antsy in the pantsy, to figure out how it was going to be revealed. What was going to happen? How was this knowledge going to come about? The implication being that Phang has been the Avatar since he was born, and this is going to be the moment where it is revealed to him that he actually knows it. Because, like I mentioned earlier, no one knows where the Avatar's at or where to search for him, and so there wasn't this typical hunt to find the Avatar when they were a child and to begin training and stuff like that. And so Phang just kind of had this power within him all along, and it just never manifested itself, or at least not that he knew. And so the players are all wondering, well, how's that going to happen? Well, as they're walking home from the play, they notice that there is an eerie mist that is blanketing the street, and it is eerily quiet as well. There doesn't seem to be anyone around. The previously busy, bustling city is now just dead quiet, and I didn't have to say any of that for my players to get to know what was going on. All I had to say was that there was like a blanket of mist across the street. I didn't even use the word eerie. I just said a blanket of mist, and then one of my players is just like, oh shit. And she's like, man, we're throwing down, it's happening. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's just a mist. And like, no, man, no. So, a warning to you game masters out there, if you're going to use mist, be sure that you don't always incorporate mist with bad stuff, or you don't always associate it with bad stuff. Sometimes just have nothing happen while it's misty, so that they're unsuspecting when you do have something hiding in the mist. I totally had something hiding in the mist, though. Someone attacks them while they're walking home and no one else is around. They get attacked by a mysterious, masked figure who has attacks them from several blocks away at first, I think. I just had them throwing stones like earth blasts with like just incredible distance and accuracy and power. And so Phang, as soon as he realizes they're under attack, he quickly pulls up a dust cloud around them, and so that the person won't have visibility on them. He can try to figure out exactly where it's coming from. He rolls pretty well on his perception check while peeking outside of his dust cloud, and he manages to figure out that they're attacking from the rooftops, several blocks away. And it looks like they're making their way towards him now, though, incredibly quickly as well, just leaping very nimbly from treetop, or not treetop, nimbly bimbly from treetop. No, jumping very nimbly from rooftop to rooftop in their approach. So whoever they are, they appear very intent on doing harm to these people. A few more rocks are thrown. As this figure grows closer, they manage to just use one of their earthbending forms to pull Tiki down into the ground, and she just gets trapped. She's up to her neck in just dirt, essentially, and she's unable to make her escape checks, and so she's pretty much just stuck there throughout this whole fight. Meanwhile, Pema ran for guards, I think. I think Phang might have given the order, like, hey, quick, go, I'll try to hold this person off, you run and get some help. Go get the city guard or someone who can help us out. And Pema's like, okay, and she runs off and tries to find some help. Meanwhile, this masked figure gets closer and closer and engages them in combat, melee combat. They engage Phang. Phang gets close enough. He thinks he might have a chance in close range since those earth blasts are so brutal. He pulls out his sword. He takes a swing, and he rolls a natural 20. I ask him to roll again to confirm critical, and he rolls a natural 20. For those of you who don't know what's going on, this is pretty crazy. This is my main villain for my quest, or one of the main villains in my quest. And they almost died the first time that I tried to dramatically reveal them as this super powerful villain. Thankfully, he did not confirm his third crit. He did not get a coup de grace. He scored a double critical, and that was that. It did quite a bit of damage, and this individual was pretty injured at that point. But I go with my gut, and I go with the numbers, and the numbers say that even though this person just took a double crit and they just took a bunch of damage from that sword, they are actually still in pretty good shape. You don't really suffer any consequences for damage until you drop below 0, and so they were actually still doing pretty good. And I knew that the odds of him getting another hit like that were going to be astronomical, and so I pressed the attack. And eventually, Phang went unconscious, just as I had planned. And, he almost went unconscious, essentially. He blacked out, and he was therefore not conscious for what happened next. In fact, the only player who was able to observe what happened next was Tiki, because she was the only one who was still there, and she hadn't been knocked unconscious. She was just still stuck there in the dirt, and after this masked figure realized that she wasn't a threat, she just kind of left her alone. So, focusing on Phang, Tiki sees Fang's eyes begin to glow suddenly as his body begins to fall. His eyes snap open with a bright white light, and his body catches itself, and he rises into the air on a column of air just funneling underneath him, and he pulls together all of these other elements around himself. And Tiki is the only one to witness Phang unleash this devastating multi-bending blast against this masked assailant who has attacked them in the middle of the night. And so Tiki is the only one who knows that Phang is the Avatar. Because after this attack, and after fending off this masked assailant, Phang again falls unconscious, hits the ground. A minute or two later, the city guards show up with Pema, and they bring Phang back to consciousness. They dig Tiki out of the ground, and they try to figure out what was going on. There is no sign of the assailant, save an unmarked sword, a long sword, very standard and very common in make. It appears to be military issue. That's pretty much the only thing about it that really has any noteworthy value. I just want to note really quickly that my players did a fantastic job of role-playing this entire session, of not using the knowledge of who was the Avatar in a metagame fashion, and just sort of sitting on that and just sitting through everything that I had prepared until I finally revealed it. I thought they did a fantastic job. Everyone was super into it. And even after the fight, Tiki was just like staring at Phang in like awe and reverence, wasn't really, wasn't able to say anything, and Phang would just kind of look over like, what's going on, what is it, he didn't know, and he was making sure that his character portrayed that very well, that his character didn't let on that he was the Avatar, or that he knew that he was the Avatar. Anyway, that's all for this episode. I'll see you guys next week when my players make their way to the small village of La Ming. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you soon.